One of the most shocking storylines in college football in 2024 was the rise of the Indiana Hoosiers. Some would argue they are the worst Power 4 program in the history of college football, and others would say it's Wake Forest, but Indiana is not good at football. They are usually near the bottom of the Big Ten, but randomly last year, in their first season under head coach Curt Cignetti, they had their best season in school history and ended up going to the college football playoff and had the closest game of any of the first round teams. A lot of people like to give Indiana flack for their schedule, but to be fair, this is a program that is scheduling teams to try to win 6 games and not go to college football playoff appearances. They ended up making the playoff, and many people thought they were fraudulent, but either way, they are getting hyped for 2025, and some think they could make another surprise run to the college football playoff. Honestly, we'll have to wait and see about that, but in today's video, I want to preview the 2025 Indiana Hoosiers, talk about last season, who they gained, who they lost, go through their schedule, and make a prediction on how I think they will do this year. It may not be as good as you think, and that's why it's titled The Harsh Truth. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and preview the 2025 Indiana Hoosiers. Okay, so as many of you guys know, I'm a diehard Mizzou fan, and they are my favorite team, but the program that comes in second place for me is the Indiana Hoosiers. I've always been a big IU fan, and last year was super fun to watch. I'd also say it was extremely unexpected, as going into the season, Indiana was not only picked to finish near the bottom of college football, but 17th in the Big Ten. They ended up playing Florida International in their first game, and they would beat the Panthers 31-7. Cool, they beat a bad team. In week 2, they faced off against the worst team in the FCS in Western Illinois and won 77-3. Again, cool, you beat the worst team at the FBS and FCS level. Everyone had their eyes on that UCLA game, as it was going to be on the road and against a Power 4 team. They ended up going on the road to Pasadena and won 42-13 in the Rose Bowl. This was unexpected, and now the Hoosiers were 3-0. They would continue their winning ways as they would beat Charlotte 52-14, and all of a sudden they were 4-0. They were off to a decent start, but maybe Maryland was finally going to trip them up. After a rough start to the game, Indiana definitely pulled away and won by 2 touchdowns, 42-28 against the Terps. All of a sudden, the Hoosiers were ranked number 23 in the nation and were 5-0. They'd travel on the road to play against Northwestern, and they'd win 41-24. Through the first half of their schedule, they were 6-0, and now they're on everyone's radar. They're ranked number 16 in the country, and against the best team they had played all year in Nebraska, they won 56-7. The game was not particularly close, as I was actually at that game, and it was a lot of fun to be there, and Indiana now was 7-0, and they were completely dominating. College game day would come to Bloomington for the first time the following Saturday, and without Curtis Rourke, they still managed to win 31-17 over the Washington Huskies. They now had a big target on their back, but it wouldn't stop them. They went and destroyed Michigan State 47-10 on the road, and then came back for the biggest home game in years as they'd face off with Michigan. Sure, this wasn't the same Wolverines team that won a national championship, but the Hoosiers were never able to upset them. And what I would say was the worst game Indiana played all year. They ended up winning 20-15 after getting a late stop, and this was their first 10-win season in school history. I know that is absolutely bonkers to say, but in just year 1, Curt Cignetti flipped the roster and gave them their best season ever. They were now ranked number 5 in the country and would face off with number 2 Ohio State on the road. College game day was also at this game, and if Indiana could somehow manage to win this matchup, they'd be given a lot of respect and would have a real chance at going to the Big Ten championship. Unfortunately, there were a couple of costly plays that cost the Hoosiers, like a drop punt in the end zone, and they let up a punt return, and Will Howard ran in a late garbage time touchdown, so while it was 38-15, on paper, it wasn't that terrible. They made a few more mental mistakes, and Ohio State just executed and was clearly better. I mean, they ended up winning the national championship. This didn't stop people from wanting to say that Indiana football was horrible, though, as everyone pretty much just pretended they didn't win 10 games, or that they didn't dominate pretty much every game they won. Either way, they came back home and played against Purdue in the old Oaken Bucket game and won 66-0. Luckily, this was enough to get the Hoosiers to the college football playoff, where they were a number 10 seed. It was honestly epic for me, as the first college football playoff game in the expanded era came in the state of Indiana where I'm from, and with 2 Indiana schools. It was absolutely epic, but unfortunately, the game was pretty much over in the first quarter, as Jeremiah Love had a 98-yard touchdown, and Indiana never recovered. They didn't start playing football until the last few minutes, as they actually ended up scoring a couple of touchdowns in the last few minutes, and had they got a 2-point conversion, they could have made it an 8-point game, and the onside kick would have been a lot more intriguing. Either way, Notre Dame had let off the gas, but Indiana lost 27-17, officially ending their storybook season. They ended up going 11-2 with an 8-1 record in the Big Ten and would finish ranked number 10 in the nation. Tino Sunseri, their co-offensive coordinator, would end up taking the offensive coordinator job at UCLA, but they retained both Cignetti and offensive coordinator Mike Shanahan. They also kept Bryant Haynes, who was a really good DC, and brought back a lot of key players. They're led by Curtis Rourke at quarterback, who apparently was struggling with injury all year long. He threw for 3,042 yards, 29 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions, and won the award for the best player from the country of Canada. The running back spot had a two-headed monster in Justice Ellison and Tyson Lawton, as Ellison had 848 yards and 10 touchdowns, and Tyson Lawton had 668 yards and 12 touchdowns. Both Kalon Black and Elijah Green were also pretty solid, combining for nearly 500 yards and 7 touchdowns on the ground, and Indiana had a really good ground game. In terms of the receiver spot, they had 6 guys who were pretty impactful, as Elijah Surratt led the way with 53 catches for 957 yards and 8 touchdowns. Omar Cooper Jr. had 28 catches for 594 yards and 7 touchdowns, and then Miles Price, Keyshawn Williams, Miles Cross, and tight end Zach Horton also each had over 20 catches and over 3 touchdowns apiece. Overall, their offense was really good. In terms of the defense, Aiden Fisher led the way with 118 tackles, which was pretty incredible, and Mikel Kamara ended up having 10 sacks. Sophomore D'Angelo Pons led the way with 9 pass deflections, and then Amari Farrell had 4 interceptions. Indiana had a really good team, but they would end up losing a couple of key guys. In terms of the 2025 NFL Draft, they lost C.J. West, a defensive tackle, as he went in the 4th round with pick number 113 to the 49ers, and then they lost Curtis Rourke, their quarterback, to the San Francisco 49ers a couple of rounds later in round 7. They obviously lost a couple of key players, but do bring back a substantial amount of talent, and they did decent in the transfer portal. The recruiting class ranked number 39 in the nation, as it was headlined by 4-star safety Byron Baldwin Jr. Other than that, it was a lot of 3-star talent, but they did well in the portal, as I said. They grabbed 23 transfers, which included Jonathan Brady from Cal, Keelan Wyatt from Maryland, Stephen Daly from Kent State, Pat Coogan from Notre Dame, Devon Boykin from NC State, Holden Stays from Tennessee, Rylan Gandy from Pitt, Tyler Morris from Michigan, Khalil Benson from Colorado, Grant Wilson from Old Dominion, Zen Mikulski from Ohio State, Lewis Moore from Ole Miss, Sam Lindsey from Georgia State, Mekhi Jackson from App State, Fernando Mendoza from Cal, Roman Hemby from Maryland, Riley Nowakowski from Wisconsin, Dominic Ratcliffe from Texas State, Hosea Wheeler from Western Kentucky, Lee Beebe Jr. from UAB, Mitch McCarthy from UCF, and Marion Knighton from Northern Illinois, and Brendan Frank, a kicker from Texas State. There were a lot of transfers in this year's class, but there's a couple of them that stick out to me. Obviously, they ended up doing well on the offensive line, as they grabbed Mikulski, Benson, and Coogan. They grabbed a couple of good receivers in Tyler Morris and Jackson from App State. But honestly, the two biggest ones are the running back and quarterback position, as they grabbed Roman Hemby, one of the top backs in the Big Ten from Maryland last year, and then Fernando Mendoza, a top 25 transfer overall, and one of the top quarterbacks in the nation. His little brother Alberto was already on the roster last year, so that was the connection. But either way, he'll be asked to step up right away and be a big-time player for them. In terms of the quarterbacks on the roster, obviously Fernando Mendoza is going to be the guy, and they're putting all their chips in him. But in terms of the backups, you'll have Grant Wilson, another transfer, and then you'll have his little brother Alberto Mendoza. It seems Tyler Cherry is injured and taking the year off, so he will not be a factor. He was a blue chip at one point. At the running back spot, Lawton is gone, but they will return Kalon Black, and then both Roman Hemby and Lee Beebe Jr. both should see plenty of time. Honestly, I think they have a good committee approach here, and I think they're going to be really solid. At the wide receiver spot, they returned their 2 best guys in Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper Jr., and then you'll also have Cal transfer Jonathan Brady, former blue chip E.J. Williams, who's back, App State transfer Mekhi Jackson, and former recruit Charlie Becker. Those 6 are pretty solid, and unfortunately Tyler Morris got injured, so he's done for the year. And there's a couple of other players who could step up immediately, maybe freshman Davion Chandler. At the tight end spot, you'll have Holden Stays, and unfortunately, he's not able to put it together at either Notre Dame or Tennessee, so we'll see if he can pan out. But either way, he has lots of potential. I'm not even going to try to talk about the offensive line or most of the defense, but they do return a couple of big players on defense, including Mikael Kamara, who's a projected first or second round pick in some people's eyes, Aiden Fisher, who was one of the top linebackers in college football last year, and then D'Angelo Pons, who's been recently projected as a first round draft pick on ESPN. They obviously have some really good players, and overall this seems like a good team. Mendoza has first-round quarterback potential. They've got a good committee at the running back spot, a couple of really experienced receivers, a solid offensive line, and a defense with some star talent. Indiana should be pretty solid, but how will that translate to wins? Well, unfortunately, Indiana is not going to avoid the easy schedule jokes, as their first game will come against Old Dominion. The Monarchs aren't exactly the greatest team in college football, and Indiana should win that game pretty easily. It'll be a snooze fest the first couple of weeks as they play the worst team in the FBS in Kennesaw State, then they play FCS foe, who's from an hour northwest in Indiana State. They should see easy wins against the Sycamores, the Owls, and the Monarchs to start out at 3-0. They will then stay at home to play against Illinois, who I'm pretty sure will probably be ranked by that time, and this will be a big test. Can Indiana beat the team that won 10 wins last year? And if they win this game, I think they could have a similar season to last year. Illinois seems to be very up and down under Bielema, and that's why I think Indiana is going to win. Indiana will get their first win against a Power 4 team in the Illini and advance to 4-0. After that, they have the most difficult two-game stretch of the season, as they then travel on the road to Iowa and Oregon. To first highlight that game against the Hawkeyes, I have no clue which Hawkeyes team is going to show up. They always are tough to beat at home, and they always have a good defense, but they've tried to change their offensive strategy. Mark Gronowski, their new quarterback from South Dakota State, was one of the best players in the FCS the last few years, but I don't know how he'll do at Iowa. Honestly though, I still think the Hawkeyes are going to pull off the upset here and win by probably a field goal and give Indiana their first loss of the season. It does not get any easier for them as they then travel on the road to Oregon. Sure, Oregon has to find a new quarterback, a new running back, and some new receivers, but they're at the point where they can just plug and play and reload, and they got an insane transfer portal class, so I don't think Oregon will take much of a step back. Even if Oregon's a little bit off, they still win this game, and Indiana will now be 4-2. By this point, everybody will be saying they're overrated, but I think Indiana does bounce back. They then come home to play against Michigan State, who in my opinion is not going to be all that great. I think Jonathan Smith is a really good coach, but I don't know how much they improved from last season, and I think Indiana wins this game. After that, they then play against UCLA, and this is going to be very intriguing because Nico Iamaleava comes to town and former quarterbacks coach Tino Sunseri. I think this will definitely be the most interesting home game they play all year, but I still don't have a lot of faith in UCLA, even though they have Nico, and I think Indiana wins this one as well. Then going into the month of November, they start out with a road game against the Maryland Terrapins. Indiana for some reason had a lot of problems with Maryland the last few years until this past season, and I think the Terps are going to be near the bottom of the Big Ten. They also usually play terrible in the month of November, and I think Indiana is just the better team, and this will probably be a slugfest, but Indiana wins. They will have won 3 straight games going into that Penn State matchup, and while 2 years ago they almost went into Happy Valley and won, I just don't see that this year. Last year I picked Ohio State to win the title. This year I'm putting my money on Penn State. So I think the Nittany Lions are going to be the best team in the Big Ten this year, and they should win this game pretty easily. I mean, if Penn State doesn't win it this year, they never will, and unfortunately that will give Indiana their 3rd loss. After that, to finish out the season, they'll play against Wisconsin at home, and then play in the Oaken Bucket game against Purdue. Wisconsin's an interesting team, as they're still waiting to blow up under Luke Fickell, and they're putting all their faith in new quarterback transfer Billy Edwards Jr. from Maryland. I'm honestly not sure what to make of this Wisconsin team, but if they've had a bad year to this point, there's a real chance that Fickell could be fired towards the end of the season, and that this game is an easy win for the Hoosiers. Either way, I think Indiana is the better team, and will win this game at home. To finish off the year, they'll travel 2 hours up US 231 and play against the Purdue Boilermakers. Purdue will be in their first year under head coach Barry Odom, who had previous stops at Mizzou and UNLV, but the Boilers were the worst team in the Power 4 last year for a reason, and they lost pretty much all their top talent. I do not think Purdue will be very good, and maybe in a couple of years they'll be better, but I think Indiana is the better team, and despite getting blanked 66-0 last year, I don't think the Boilers are going to win or put up much of a fight. If you do the math here, that means Indiana will go 9-3, with their best 3 wins being against Illinois, Wisconsin, and UCLA, and then losses on the road to Iowa, Oregon, and Penn State. Honestly, maybe they win that Iowa game or lose that Illinois game. Either way, I have Indiana going 9-3 or 8-4. I don't know where that 4th loss would come, but it's really hard to see them doing better than 10-2 at its peak. Winning on the road against Oregon or Penn State is nearly impossible, and I just don't see it happening. 9-3 obviously would not be good enough to get them to the college football playoff, but it would be a good second season under Coach Sig. We'll have to wait and see what happens, but that's my official prediction, 9-3. What do you guys think, though? If you're an Indiana or a Big Ten fan, what do you think of the Hoosiers this year? How do you think they will do? And what storyline from this year's IU team am I missing? Also, be sure to let me know which team I should cover next down below. Leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out one of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.